So let's talk about smoke, and then I'll offer you guys some miscellaneous tricks that will help you finish out the scene. Okay, so the DOP import field, we have our rest, we have density, and what I first did here is converted this to VDBs. Now, look, I've already taught this rest field trick before in a quick tip, so if you haven't seen that, or if you've never done any sort of rest stuff before, then go ahead and check out the link to that video. You should see it on the screen. But we have a volume VOP right here. I'll give you the gist of what's going on. Rest and rest ratio get brought into these binds right here. Same with rest2 and rest2 ratio. That goes to a dual rest solver. That then feeds to a unified noise, which is set to 3D dual rest, 1D noise. This all then goes to a fits, where I fit this between 0 and 1, and I multiply that against our original density. After that, we mix this in with a bias, and that's pretty much it. We're just adding a bit of detail by using a noise, and once we're done with the rest, we then delete it right here, delete anything you don't need, and then we cache out the dust sim. In this situation, it's also good to use a clean SOP and say remove everything except for name. So I believe that only leaves us with density. And that's good because, again, we want to keep this memory as low as possible. So now at this point, we've pretty much covered everything when it comes to the main setup. Now, getting across the finish line is always going to take a lot of troubleshooting, and you're just going to have to spend time trying to dial in these settings to get it to look right. For the remainder of this course, I want to show you a few miscellaneous things. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, but I think that this is a good excuse to take a look at a test render like this, find some things that aren't working. Realistically in production, you're going to run into pieces that are floating in midair. You're going to run into weird behavior when it comes to the normals of things. And I just wrote down a few things that I just wanted to tell you about so that if you run into this in production, you have some idea in the back of your head of how to navigate situations like this. So let's start this off with some lighting, texturing, and scene organization. We have these purple lights right here. This belongs to the old render that I showed you at the beginning of this course. And in a future course, I'll be using this lighting setup to run with this whole scene. But I wanted something separate because we want to focus on the ground. So I basically have two lights. Smoke, this smoke gobo light, and an HDR. That's it. HDR is a sunny, sort of harsh, shadowy day. I wanted the harsh shadows because it really brings out all the different debris and the shapes and the interesting things that it does, the interesting shadows that those pieces can cast into the smoke. That is a cool reason to have a sunny, harsh shadow HDR. The smoke gobo light is set to only affect the smoke in the scene, so this isn't affecting anything but the smoke. And the cool thing about it is that if we go to this texture right here, this is just from my texture library, I used one of these really harsh masked out trees, like you see here in this Gobo 31 section. And the cool thing about a texture like this with smoke is that all the tentacles of the tree are going to appear as lines in the smoke. And so you can really see that. I'll show you right here. See how there's these tiny little God rays going through the smoke? They're not really God rays. They're basically just the gobo blocking things out, shadowing things out, like right here. So that is what's going on for the smoke. Really a big secret or a big trick to nice looking smoke or dust or whatever is to have lighting which is broken up like you see with this gobo and to create these sort of fake atmospheric effects. It's a really awesome way to add detail without much effort. All right, so the combination of those two things makes up the lighting situation. Now, for the materials, I don't really have a whole lot going on, except for the temple and the rocks, but I won't get into that because it's not really important. In this scene in general, my focus is not so much on materials. I could go much further with the ground than what I have. Right now, it's basically just a default material with a bump map on it. The main thing to know about anything that's a destruction object, though, is that if you want to texture and shade something like this, you'll need to use the rest attributes to do so. And if you're not familiar with that technique, then I'd recommend you check out Shading 3, where I talk about the rest and how to get noises and triplanar projections to stick to objects without using any UVs. Check out the link that's popping up on the screen if you want to learn more about how to do that, because that's more of a shading course topic. Okay, well, what else do we have on this list? A bunch of things. Let's go back to what we were seeing in the previous render and talk about some of the issues that test render had, how to go about troubleshooting this, how to read what's happening, and try to gain some insights from what we see. We'll do all that in the next video.